From the moment Elena entered the world, silence followed her like a shadow. She was born in a small apartment where the wallpaper peeled at the corners, where leaky faucets dripped endlessly into chipped sinks, and where her parents carried the weight of poverty heavier than their own bodies could bear. Her cries never came the way other babies did. Her mouth would open, her face would strain, but no sound escaped. Doctors explained gently that her vocal cords had not developed as they should, that she might never speak. Her mother cried quietly in the hospital bed, clutching her tiny daughter, while her father paced the room with clenched fists, already weary of a life that seemed too cruel. At home, her silence became a constant reminder of what was missing. Her mother, Sophia, tried her best, speaking to Elena as though she could reply, filling the air with lullabies and whispered prayers. But her father, Marco, grew bitter. "What kind of life will she have?" he muttered one night at the kitchen table. "A daughter who can't even say her own name? She'll always be a burden." Sophia pressed her lips together, eyes wet, but she didn't argue. She was too tired from double shifts at the laundry factory, too drained to defend her daughter against the man who should have been her protector. Elena grew into a quiet child. Not because she wanted to be invisible, but because the world had already decided she was. At school, the teachers sighed whenever her name appeared on their rosters. They tried for a while, giving her picture cards to hold up, encouraging her to write on scraps of paper, but most eventually gave up. "She'll never keep up," one teacher whispered in the hallway, not realizing Elena stood nearby, listening, her small hands clutching the straps of her backpack until her knuckles turned white. Her classmates were less forgiving. At recess, children would taunt her, covering their mouths as if mocking her silence or shouting, "Cat got your tongue?" before running away laughing. Elena never chased them. She would retreat to the far corner of the playground, where the cracked cement met the edge of a broken fence, and there she would sit with a stub of a pencil and an old notebook her mother had found at a thrift store. On its yellowed pages, she drew shapes at first, clumsy, uneven circles, rough lines that meant nothing to anyone but her. But slowly, as the days passed, her drawings began to take form. A house, a tree, a girl with wide eyes staring out at the world. At home, her father barely noticed. When she tried to show him a page once, a careful sketch of their family sitting at the dinner table, he waved it away. "Drawings won't change anything, Elena. You need to learn how to survive. You'll never get by with silly pictures." Her mother, though, lingered a little longer over the pages. Some nights, after work, she would sit on the edge of Elena's bed, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. She couldn't always find the words, but her eyes softened, and Elena clung to those small moments as proof that someone, somewhere, saw her. One winter evening, when Elena was 10, she came home from school shivering, her shoes soaked through from the snow. She walked into the apartment and found her parents mid-argument. "She needs help, Marco," Sophia pleaded. "Speech therapy, special classes, something." Marco slammed his hand against the table. "And with what money, Sophia? Huh? You think therapy is free? You think I can work any harder than I already do?" She's mute, and that's it. The sooner you accept it, the better. Elena stood in the doorway, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to say she wasn't broken, but only silence poured from her. She retreated to her room, shut the door, and pulled out her notebook. Her pencil flew across the page in anger, scratching lines that turned into a stormy sea, dark waves crashing against rocks. In the middle of it all, she drew a small figure, a girl standing firm on the shore, facing the raging ocean. For the first time, Elena realized her drawings weren't just pictures. They were her voice. As Elena stepped into her teenage years, the silence around her grew heavier. At school, she no longer expected kindness. The laughter of her classmates echoed like knives in her ears, each whisper reminding her she was different, that she would never belong. Teachers spoke over her as though she wasn't there, her desk often pushed to the corner of the classroom. But while the world ignored her, her notebooks multiplied. What started as a few pages became stacks hidden beneath her bed, drawings of faces she saw in the street, landscapes from her imagination, fragments of dreams that no one else could see. She carried a pencil everywhere, tucking it into the sleeve of her jacket, her fingers aching if too many hours passed without sketching. At 14, Elena discovered colors. Her mother managed to buy her a second-hand box of watercolors from a flea market, the kind with chipped pans and half-used tubes. To anyone else, it would have looked worthless, but to Elena, it was treasure. That night, she stayed awake painting until dawn, her tiny brush dipping into reds, blues, and golds, her silence filling with life. For the first time, the gray walls of her room blazed with hope. Her father noticed once, briefly, when he saw a painting of a street filled with lanterns and children laughing. He frowned. "Pretty but useless," he muttered, tossing the page onto her bed. Elena picked it up, smoothed the wrinkles, and tucked it into her notebook. She had already learned not to expect his approval. One afternoon, when she was 15, Elena entered a school art competition. She painted what she knew best: silence. On a large canvas, she painted a girl standing at the center of a crowded city, her mouth open in a scream, but no sound escaping. Around her, faces blurred into shadows, people walking past without noticing her. The judges looked at the painting for a long time, whispering to each other. Elena didn't win. She never expected to, but her art was displayed in the school hallway for a week. For that week, students passed by and stared. Some pointed, some laughed, but a few stopped quietly, their eyes softening, as if they finally saw her. That tiny crack of recognition planted a seed. If her voice could not be heard, maybe her art could speak for her. Still, the weight at home pressed down harder. Her father grew colder, disappearing for longer hours, returning with anger in his fists and alcohol on his breath. Her mother worked herself to exhaustion, coughing late at night from factory dust. Elena painted more furiously, as though each stroke of her brush could shield her from the crumbling walls of her home. One night, during a storm, Elena sat by the window sketching the lightning tearing through the sky. Her father staggered in, slamming the door, shouting about bills and failures. He saw the sketchbook on the table, snatched it up, and flipped through the pages. His face twisted. "All this? Worthless. You'll starve with this nonsense." And then, in a flash of rage, he tore a page in half. Elena froze. Her chest ached. Something inside her shattered. But she didn't cry. She picked up the torn page after he stumbled to bed, taped it together carefully, and whispered to herself without sound, "I will never let him silence me." From that night forward, Elena painted as if her life depended on it. Because in truth it did. At 16, Elena's world was still a cage, but for the first time, she found a small crack in its walls. It came unexpectedly, on an afternoon when the school organized an exhibition. Each student was required to submit one piece of art, whether they wanted to or not. Most kids scribbled something careless, but Elena poured herself into it. She painted a girl standing in the middle of a storm, her hair whipping in the wind, holding a lantern that glowed against the darkness. The light was small, but steady, refusing to be blown out. For Elena, it was more than a painting, it was a confession of survival. When the exhibition opened, a woman paused in front of Elena's canvas. She was tall, with silver hair tied in a neat bun, wearing a long coat that smelled faintly of turpentine and old books. She studied the piece for a long time before asking a teacher, "Who made this?" That woman was Mrs. Vargas, a retired art teacher who occasionally visited schools to scout young talent. Unlike others, she didn't see Elena as just another quiet girl in the background. She saw a story, a voice, hiding in brushstrokes. Mrs. Vargas requested to meet Elena. The teachers hesitated. Elena rarely spoke after all, but eventually guided her forward. Elena stood small, clutching her notebook to her chest. "This is yours?" Mrs. Vargas asked gently. Elena nodded. "Do you know what you've painted?" Elena tilted her head. She wanted to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she opened her notebook and scribbled, "It's me." Mrs. Vargas's eyes softened. For the first time in her life, someone looked at Elena not with pity or mockery, but with recognition. The following weeks, Mrs. Vargas began inviting Elena to her studio on weekends. It was a cramped attic above a bookstore, filled with canvases stacked against the walls, jars of brushes, and sunlight streaming through a dusty window. To Elena, it was heaven. She painted there for hours, sometimes alongside Mrs. Vargas, sometimes alone. For the first time, silence wasn't a burden. It was space. It was freedom. But freedom was fragile. Her father grew suspicious of her absences. One night he confronted her. "Where do you keep disappearing?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Elena hesitated, clutching her sketchbook tighter. "Answer me." His hand slammed against the table. Her mother tried to intervene. "She's just with a teacher." "A teacher," he spat. "Wasting time. While I work myself to death, she plays with colors." Elena lowered her eyes, refusing to let him see the fire burning in them. She didn't speak. She never did. But inside, her silence was no longer weakness. It was defiance. Mrs. Vargas noticed Elena's bruised spirit, though Elena never said a word about home. Instead, her pain bled into the canvas. Darker strokes, angrier colors. And yet, always, that same lantern of light flickered somewhere in the painting. One evening, as Elena was leaving the studio, Mrs. Vargas stopped her. "Elena," she said softly, "you have a gift. Don't let anyone take it away from you. Your silence is not emptiness, it's strength. And one day, people will hear it." Elena didn't answer with words. She simply smiled, a small, fragile smile. And in that moment she knew. Her art was her escape, her rebellion, her voice. And though her father's dismissals echoed at home, though her nights were still heavy with loneliness, something inside her had shifted. For the first time, Elena felt the possibility of a different life. A life where silence could speak louder than words.